So let's talk about the Haut-Médoc appellation.
Yes, we're moving further south. And Haut-Médoc is where sort of the real fun starts, where you start to have some classified estates as well. I'm not saying that to mock Médoc, but it's this is where you get some higher quality wines, but also the prices can increase because you can still find some Haut-Médocs quite inexpensive. But you also have some classified estates. This is also where you have some of the better, even if the really best Cru Bourgeois and the non-classified estates tends to be in the more well-known appellations, Pauillac and Saint-Estèphe and so forth. But you have some really nice wines here, and you have La Lagune, Cantemerle, La Tour Carnet. We have Belgrave and Camensac, which are classified. We have some unclassified, like talking about history. One of the really historic properties of Bordeaux, which has a connection. Every time I taste the wine from Château de la Marque, I always think about the history of this estate because it's really, really old. And it was built as a fortress to keep the Vikings out of Bordeaux, which people don't realize that, but the Vikings actually went into, tried for centuries, they tried to get into Bordeaux. I don't think they ever succeeded, actually. So I think the oldest spot on the chateau today is a ground floor, because the first fortress was in wood, like they were back then. So that's obviously gone after, I think that was like in the 800s or something like that. But I think that if I remember correctly, the oldest part of the fortress today is the floor of the chapel, which I think is from the 9th century or something like that. So really old, and they've been producing wine since the 1400s, I think. The people running it today is descendants of the first guy who run this place. So it's the same family, still there millennium later, which is just insane. So
how is that even possible?
That's massive history. But as a Norwegian, when you drink Château de la Marque, there's a connection because it was us they wanted to keep out of there. We obviously had good taste already back then.
But so that's the Haut-Médoc.
Yeah, so that's in La Marque, just north of Margaux, but in Haut-Médoc appellation. Cantemerle is another incredibly old estate. I think it's also from the 1100s or something like that. So there's some really old estates here, which has produced wines for centuries. La Tour Carnet is also old fortress, which was built, I think it's from the 1400s or 1300s or something like that, which was built to protect Bordeaux as well. And the main difference between Haut-Médoc and Médoc is that the wines tend to have more concentration. It gets a bit warmer. The influence of the Atlantic is a bit less. And you also have more gravel in the soil, so you get a bit warmer soils. Tend to have a somewhat higher at least, percentage of Cabernet Sauvignon, which sort of means that you have a warmer soils. Cabernet Sauvignon wants to have gravel, and Merlot wants to have more clay, and clay is always cooler. If you have clay in your garden and you dig a hole in the warmest day in July or August, and you just dig a hole 15-20 centimeters down and stick your hand in there, you can feel the soil is cold. So it's very, very different. So and it's quite moist. So as we say, Cabernet Sauvignon wants to have dry feet, meaning dry roots, while Merlot wants to have wet and cold feet. So there's a difference, and that when you go into Pauillac and Margaux and Saint-Julien, obviously you will have even more gravel and even more
Cabernet Sauvignon.
Cabernet, yeah. Exactly. There's a difference. So the wines tend to be a bit more robust, a bit more concentration. And you also have some of these gravel outcrops like you do in the other appellations, but they tend to be a little bit further in from the river. It's cooler in general than Pauillac, Saint-Julien, and so forth, but it's you still can have these really deep gravelly soils, so it's warmer than Médoc. So there is a slight change. That doesn't mean that there's a big difference, but in style of wines, but there can be a difference, and you get in general higher quality wines from Haut-Médoc.
So, more specific producers. You mentioned that Haut-Médoc has some classified estates.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned them already. The 5, 6.
The 5.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one thing which is interesting is that these classified estates, it's actually quite a long row of classified estates, which is they start out in Saint-Julien, Bechevel, Branet de Cru, Saint-Pierre, and Cru la Rose, and then you have Lagrange, which are all in Saint-Julien, and then you have Belgrave, which is the first one from Haut-Médoc, and then you have Comensac, and then you have La Tour Carnet. So you have this string of classified estates which goes inland, which you don't really have any other place. So that's where most of these classified Haut-Médocs are, and then you go further south of Margaux, where you have La Lagune and Cantemerle. So
Saint-Julien, that's also a name that you hear.
Yeah, but that's a different appellation, which is within Haut-Médoc, like Pauillac, which is just north, like Margaux. Yeah, but you also have 2 more, which is Listrac and Mouly, which is between Saint-Julien and Margaux, but a little bit further inland, and sort of similar in style to Haut-Médoc. Bit more tannins, a bit more structure, because you don't have that influence from the river that much, and you can also have a bit more trouble with frost. But you have a bigger concentration of nice estates in Mouly and Listrac. So you have a lot of the greatest Cru Bourgeois, and you also have some of the top wines which are not used to be classified as Cru Bourgeois exceptionnel, but they left. So you have like Peugeot, Chasplain, and then you have estates like Saucian du Malais, which was created fairly recently on an outcrop of gravel very close to the estuary, which makes absolutely wonderful wines. And all of these wines that I just mentioned would be 40 to 50 euros thereabouts in most vintages. Sometimes you can get them down towards 30, while these classified Haut-Médocs also tends to be cheaper than the Margaux and Pauillac ones and so forth. So they tend to be like, I think you can probably get some vintages down to 45 euros, especially Comensac, which tends to be good value, and probably up to 80 euros for La Lagune in a really nice vintage. So that's sort of that price range. Not as expensive as especially Saint-Julien's and Pauillac's can be, and tend to be. They tend to need a bit more aging, just like Mouly and Listrac. You often need to wait. You tend to need that in Pauillac as well, but they need about 15 to 20 years before they start to show. They can be a little rough on the tannins. Some will probably kill me for this, but if you're like me, that you want some development in wines, I think you should wait about 15 to 20 years. But they can also age tremendously. If you can have some really lovely La Lagunes from the 70s still, and probably older than that. At least I don't really see them around much older than the 70s anymore. But I remember that, but it's probably 10 years old. Or 10 years ago now, I had a absolutely lovely 67 Cantemerle. 50, 60 years they can easily do. I had a fantastic 55 Chasplain. I think it was at least a Magnum, but maybe it was a double Magnum, meaning 3 liter. Peugeot, I've had 28 from regular bottle, which was absolutely stunning. I've had 2 bottles. You sort of have a bunch of properties which make very nice wines within a very small area. And these can age superbly. The 28 Peugeot, absolutely stunning wine. I also had 55 Bourgeois, and wonderful. I was so surprised how nice fruit and body these wines had. They were served next to Monrose, from Saint-Estèphe, which was stunning. But considering that these wines are probably 1/3, 1/4 the price even from 55, if you find them in the market, they're not that many points behind, maybe 2 points behind quality-wise. So absolutely wonderful wines. And if you find these wines old in the market, especially good vintages, there's a definite chance that these wines will be tremendous value and they will still be alive because they have the backbone, they have the concentration, they have the structure to last a long time. So you can find some absolute wonderful wines. It doesn't always have to be super expensive. You probably have to pay maybe 150, 200 euros, I don't know, but it's a 70-year-old wine, so that's not too bad for, one thing is to spend money. Yeah, you have some danger with opening older bottles and buying older bottles because you have no idea how they were stored. But I understand why older vintages cost a lot of money or cost a fair bit of money. I don't understand why people are super eager to spend 400 or 500 euros on current release, which you need to store for 30 years until it's actually what you're paying for. And that's the thing today, that older vintages, mature vintages from the same estate tend to be cheaper or the same price as the current release. And that's a weird thing in the market these days.
That's weird.
Yeah, because it was never like that before. Older vintages were more expensive, at least. Well, that's another thing which has happened, which is a bit weird. There was a huge difference, even on the first growth, between, vintages which people, the consumers, the collectors knew were probably dead, but there was still a market because maybe you wanted to have the entire range of wines, so meaning that 73, 74, 77, 71, 72, well, 71s can be good, but these difficult vintages probably paid 50 euros, maybe 30 euros for a bottle of a first growth, while the top vintage was 250, 300 euros, going back only 15 years. But now the current vintage is 500 to 1,000 euros. A great vintage like 82 from first growth, 1,200, 1,500, 2,000 euros, something like that, depending on how good the bottle is and the provenance. Not to be mean to Mutot by themselves, but then you have vintages like 77, which honestly, you're lucky if it's still drinkable. And that would still command 500-600 euros today, which is like, why?
Yeah, because it's like a mystery bottle.
Yeah, you basically, even if you want a label, which I can fully understand. And I'm a person who also likes to taste all vintages and get as many even old but not so good vintages. I love to sort of get my library full where I've tasted as many vintages as possible. And I'm really fortunate to have some wine collectors who, if they see something in a lot where they want something, and sometimes these sort of vintages are like just put in there to get them sold. Those wines didn't cost much. You could buy them really cheap. And now, for some reason, people are paying almost as much as a really nice vintage, which is super strange because
it doesn't make sense.
Those wines are not really that difficult to find. There's no reason for them to be that expensive because basically most of them are balsamic vinegar. So, yeah.
But okay, so in the Haut-Médoc appellation, like inside that geographical appellation, there are more appellations.
There's actually 6 more appellations.
Yeah, that's fascinating. But talk to how it has become like that. It basically, like when you narrow down the geographical area, you obviously get more unique expression of each place. You could mix grapes from several places in the Haut-Médoc area and still call it an Haut-Médoc.
Yeah.
So obviously when the area is smaller, like in the Pauillac, which is a small area inside Haut-Médoc, that guarantees you a more unique set of flavors.
Well, you get a more homogeneous style. So Pauillac in general are more homogeneous in style, like Saint-Julien. They have a more personality, sort of. It will take you maybe 1.5 hours to drive from the north of Haut-Médoc to the south of Haut-Médoc, and you will cover very, very different areas. In the flat areas just outside Bordeaux, it's very flat. It's very marshy. You don't really have even when you see the vineyards, they look really flat. They're not quite as flat as the areas around, where they mostly have farmland and grazing and actually almost like swampland some places. But the first vineyards you come to, which are still Haut-Médoc, are super flat. Not much drainage there, which you can also see when you go there in winter or when it's been raining a lot, that there's puddles in the vineyards. And that would be difficult to make really great wine. What I've always wondered if, because the weather pattern is not really super different within that hour of drive. There's some changes for sure. But if you were close to the estuary and you just brought in, 500 trucks with the gravel and the sand and whatever, and you could sort of mimic the top vineyards of Pauillac or Margaux or wherever you want to copy, you could probably make a incredibly great wine. It's, of course, completely legal. But I'm pretty sure that you could actually, if you wanted to make more of the Grand Cru Classé owners will probably kill me for saying this, but if you for 20 years made like a huge construction site where it just filled up with gravel and all sorts of and mimicking a soil, and then after 50 years you started planting vines there, and we just wanted to do something different. There we go. Because that's something I always wonder. How, can we actually recreate? The climate should be similar. So could you actually recreate great vineyards with just making them? I don't know, but should be possible.
As Francois Michaville at Théâtre de Bœuf talks about, it's basically winemaking is about letting nature just do its thing. So obviously, whatever your soil looks like, the more that you can leave it alone and make the soil do the work in the microclimate and everything.
Yeah, and some soils you can't really make, because if you have, like in Saint-Julien, where you have limestone plateau from nature's side, how can you make a limestone plateau? That's difficult, but with Haut-Médoc, which is or Médoc in itself, which is made out of millions of years with glaciers bringing and dropping stones and sand and everything, and also the big rivers bringing, and it's actually several terraces where you have different sort of not debris, but all of these things just putting layer upon layer. That sort of should be possible to mimic with bulldozers and tractors, which of course nobody wants to realize. But
that's not negative, I think, because like the great places that produces the greatest wines, because they have the correct soil and the correct grapes and everything, that's why you pay a lot for those wines, is because they are able to not come in the way of nature there. So still.
But this is actually turning quite far away from Haut-Médoc. This is just this is about dreaming about how to make a fake plateau or fake gravel outcrop to make wine somewhere where it
But the point is, Haut-Médoc is really big.
It's huge, and there's a big variation from really simple wines to pretty good wines. So, very good wines. So you have everything. It's probably one of those appellations where you can have quite some different styles. You can have some quite lean and thin wines. You can have quite elegant wines. You can have quite robust wines, lots of tannins. So you can have a lot of styles, especially when you include Molly and Listrac as well. But they are age-worthy, and in general, to just if you just want to say one general thing, they tend to be a bit more expensive than the Médocs, and they tend to be having a bit more concentration. It's a bit warmer. There's more gravel, not everywhere, of course, but I think you could probably say that in general there will be more gravel than in the Médoc. The stones will be a bit bigger, meaning they contain a bit more heat for the night. In general, you will have a bit more fruit and body to the wines than you would in the Médoc. But of course, the main appellations, the most important ones, are still even closer to the river, even more depth of the gravel, and therefore getting even more body. So, yeah, that's sort of the differences between Médoc and Haut-Médoc.